Europe spent decades and billions of euros building the dream of fully independent access to space. And in May 2026, the continent that gave the world Galileo and Copernicus and Newton quietly admitted that for its most ambitious and most scientifically vital mission yet, a rover that could prove life once existed on Mars, it needs to ask Elon Musk for a ride. That admission is not just a procurement decision. It is a geopolitical inflection point that reveals how completely the global launch market has shifted in less than a decade. It is the moment when the tension between European strategic autonomy and American commercial dominance in space became impossible to paper over with diplomatic language. And the man whose rocket Europe is now depending on is the same man whose politics have made Europe increasingly uncomfortable, whose business conduct has made space agencies nervous about single-source dependency, and whose own plans for Mars are simultaneously Europe's greatest opportunity and its most alarming liability. The mission at the center of this story is called Rosalind Franklin, named after the British crystallographer whose X-ray work was essential to discovering the structure of DNA and who was systematically denied the recognition she deserved during her lifetime. The rover is the product of years of collaboration between the European Space Agency and the Russian space agency Roscosmos. That partnership collapsed completely when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. The lander that Russia was supposed to provide, the propulsion system, the surface platform, all of it disappeared with the partnership. ESA was left with a fully functional six-wheeled rover designed to drill 2 meters below the Martian surface in search of organic molecules that could indicate past microbial life, and no way to get it there. ESA spent years rebuilding the mission with a new lander design and new partners. The result, finalized in early 2026, is a plan to launch Rosalind Franklin in late 2028 during the favorable Earth-Mars orbital alignment window that opens every 26 months. The carrier spacecraft, the landing platform, and the rover itself will all be built by European industry. NASA will contribute the rover's critical astrobiology instrument, the Mars Organic Molecule Analyzer, which will analyze samples drilled from beneath the surface where ancient organic materials are best preserved. And getting the entire stack off the ground, from its launch site, on its trajectory to Mars, will be done by a SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket, under a contract valued at $175.7 million. NASA selected the Falcon Heavy for this mission. ESA accepted that choice, and the selection immediately highlighted everything that makes the current relationship between Europe and SpaceX so uncomfortable and so unavoidable at the same time. The Falcon Heavy is the only rocket currently operating that combines the payload capacity, the reliability, and the launch cadence needed for a mission of this complexity on a deadline as firm as a Mars launch window. Miss the 2028 window, and the mission waits another 26 months. No European rocket can do what the Falcon Heavy does, not today, not in 2028, and possibly not for years after that. The European Space Agency's own Director General, Joseph Aschbacher, acknowledged the situation in the starkest terms he has used publicly. Speaking in October 2025, Aschbacher said that Europe must really catch up and make sure it comes to market with a reusable launcher relatively fast. He said Europe is on the right path, but acknowledged that it lags a few years behind its competitors. A few years, in the context of the most competitive period in the history of commercial space, is a very long time. Ariane 6, Europe's newest rocket, finally made its debut launch in July 2024 after years of delays. But Ariane 6 is not reusable. Every flight requires a new rocket. SpaceX's Falcon 9 lands its first stage booster and flies it again and again, which is the fundamental economic transformation that has made SpaceX's launch cost structurally lower than every competitor on the planet. The cost comparison is not abstract. In 2024, ESA had to request a $410 million annual subsidy from European governments simply to keep Ariane 6's prices affordable enough to compete in the commercial launch market. Ariane 6's actual launch price, based on the November 2025 launch of a Sentinel-1D satellite, came in at $96 million per flight. SpaceX's Falcon 9, after years of reusability improvements, launched the same category of satellite for $94 million in late 2022. That nominal price parity disappears when you account for the fact that SpaceX is making profit on that price, while Ariane needs public subsidy just to reach it. The gap between what it costs SpaceX to launch a rocket and what it costs Ariane to do the same thing is estimated at approximately $100 million per flight. That is not a gap that can be closed by political will or manufacturing efficiency alone. It requires a different rocket architecture. It requires reusability. And Europe's reusable rocket, currently under development, is not flying yet. This is the structural reality that creates Europe's dependence on SpaceX. It is not a failure of ambition or engineering talent. European scientists and engineers built Rosalind Franklin, which is genuinely one of the most sophisticated Mars rovers ever designed. They built Galileo, which is, by most technical measures, the best global navigation satellite system on Earth. They built the Euclid Space Telescope and the Hera planetary defense mission and dozens of other instruments that represent genuine advances in the state of the art. What they have not yet built, despite years of effort and billions of euros of investment, is a rocket that can compete with Falcon 9 on price, reliability, and cadence simultaneously. Until that rocket exists, European space missions that require more than Ariane 6 can carry, or that require launch slots that Ariane 6's limited flight rate cannot provide, will depend on SpaceX. And now comes the trust question. Because Elon Musk is not simply a rocket vendor. He is the head of a company that is simultaneously a contractor for the United States government's most sensitive national security programs, a supplier to NASA, a competitor to every other commercial satellite operator, the owner of a global social media platform, and a political actor whose involvement in the 2024 and 2025 American political landscape was the most visible and controversial of any corporate executive in living memory. His relationship with European governments has become specifically and visibly strained. Musk publicly engaged with far-right political parties in Germany and the United Kingdom during election campaigns. He made statements about European immigration policy that were criticized across the political spectrum. He used his platform in ways that European officials described as interference in domestic democratic processes. Whether or not one agrees with the political substance of any of those actions, their effect on the institutional relationship between ESA and SpaceX is real and documented. It makes the dependency uncomfortable in a way that no previous relationship with an American launch provider had been. There's also the specific question of what happens to a critical mission if Musk decides, for whatever reason, that a particular customer or contract no longer suits his interests. SpaceX terminated its contract to launch the Viasat-3 satellite in 2021. It has declined certain commercial customers whose business competed directly with its own Starlink constellation. The company operates under no international treaty obligations that would prevent it from refusing service to a customer. For routine commercial satellite launches, that flexibility is simply a market reality. For a mission like Rosalind Franklin, where years of work and hundreds of millions of euros hinge on getting a specific payload on a specific trajectory during a specific 30-day launch window in late 2028, the absence of any structural guarantee beyond a commercial contract is a source of genuine institutional anxiety for ESA. The White House's proposed FY 2027 budget adds another layer of instability to this picture. The Trump administration proposed eliminating NASA's participation in the Rosalind Franklin mission entirely. That proposal would remove the American scientific contribution, the Mars Organic Molecule Analyzer, from the Rover. It would not necessarily cancel the Falcon Heavy launch contract, which is separate from the NASA science contribution. But it would diminish the mission scientifically and would represent the continuation of a pattern in which the current American political environment has been willing to cancel or reduce international science collaborations that cost money without producing immediate domestic economic or security benefits. ESA has been navigating these political headwinds while simultaneously depending on American rockets to reach the destinations its rockets cannot. The deeper irony in Europe's position is that this dependency is not new but cumulative. When Russia's Soyuz rocket was taken off the table after Ukraine, ESA had no backup. Ariane 6 slipped past one promised debut date after another. Meanwhile, ESA used SpaceX Falcon 9 rockets to orbit Galileo satellites, the very navigation satellites Europe built as an alternative to American GPS. They used Falcon 9 for Euclid and for Hera. The pattern of using American rockets to pursue European scientific independence has become a defining structural feature of European space policy in the 2020s, and it is accelerating rather than reversing. The specific dimension of trust that makes the Musk question so sharp is the convergence of his commercial, political, and governmental roles. His company operates Starlink, which directly competes with European satellite internet services under development. His company holds classified contracts with the American intelligence community that create, at minimum, the appearance of conflicts of interest when a foreign agency entrusts him with a scientifically sensitive mission. And his personal political conduct in Europe, specifically his visible support for parties that mainstream European governments regard as destabilizing forces in their democracies, creates a reputational dimension to the dependency that previous American commercial partners simply did not carry. Boeing did not campaign for political parties in Germany. Lockheed Martin did not publicly criticize European government leaders on social media. The degree to which Musk's personal conduct has become inseparable from his commercial relationships is genuinely unprecedented in the history of international space procurement, and European institutions are navigating it without any established framework. None of this makes the Falcon Heavy the wrong choice for Rosalind Franklin. The mission science is too important, The team has waited too long after the Russian collapse, and the 2028 window is too constraining to wait for a European rocket that does not yet exist. ESA is not naive about the dependency it is accepting. It is making a calculated decision that the risk of using SpaceX, which has a 99.3% mission success rate on Falcon 9 and an unblemished record on Falcon Heavy, is lower than the risk of missing a Mars launch window or redesigning the mission around a launcher that cannot meet its requirements. But Europe's space leadership is also saying, clearly and consistently, that this situation cannot be permanent. ESA's €22 billion long-term plan includes specific funding for a reusable European launcher. The ambition is not merely to match Falcon 9, but to leapfrog it, building a next-generation rocket that is reusable from the beginning, rather than retrofitting reusability onto an existing design the way early Falcon 9 iterations were developed. Whether that ambition can be funded and executed on a timeline that matters competitively is the fundamental question facing European space policy for the next decade. There's also a harder version of the question that European space officials have begun to discuss more openly in the past year. What if the future of space access is not about Europe building a rocket competitive with Falcon 9, but about Europe securing reliable contractual access to the most capable rockets in the world, regardless of their national origin, while focusing European industrial investment on the spacecraft, the science instruments, the data systems, and the mission design capabilities where European institutions genuinely excel? That argument has proponents and critics in roughly equal measure. Its proponents point to the Galileo and Copernicus programs as examples of European excellence in applications that matter more than launch vehicles to the people who ultimately benefit from space. Its critics argue that a Europe without sovereign launch capability is a Europe that can never truly be independent in space, because every mission's fate ultimately depends on whether a non-European supplier decides to fulfill its contract. Rosalind Franklin will launch on a Falcon Heavy in 2028. It will drill 2 meters into the Martian, surface and search for the molecular signatures of ancient life using the most sensitive astrobiology instrument ever sent to another planet. If it finds what its instruments are designed to find, it will be one of the most consequential scientific discoveries in the history of our species. It will be a European instrument, built by European engineers in European factories, advancing a question that every human civilization that has ever looked at the red star in the night sky has asked in one form or another. And it will get to Mars on a rocket that Elon Musk built, launched from a pad that SpaceX operates, under a contract that could theoretically be canceled if the political and commercial winds shift in ways nobody can currently predict. Whether that reality is an embarrassment or pragmatic necessity, a geopolitical vulnerability, or simply the honest consequence of how the commercial space industry developed in the early 21st century, depends entirely on who you ask and what you think a space program is ultimately for. If a space program is about national prestige and strategic independence, then Europe's dependence on SpaceX is a failure of ambition. If a space program is about advancing human knowledge of the universe as efficiently and reliably as possible, then using the most capable rocket available to carry the most capable rover available to the most important scientific destination in the solar system is not a compromise. It is the correct decision. What is not in question is that Europe needed a ride to Mars, and there was only one company offering the right one at the right time.